War was nothing new to Korin. He had fought since he was old enough to lift a rifle. His people had been locked in endless battles for centuries, each war looking exactly like the one before it, screaming soldiers charging into chaos, fires consuming cities, and victory decided by who was still standing at the end. Korin thought he understood war. Then he saw the humans. It started with the whisper reports of a new species expanding through the galaxy. Some said they were weak, fragile, a minor threat at best. Others said they were cunning and ruthless. Korin didn't care. To him, they were just another enemy. But when the humans arrived, they didn't come like raiders. They didn't broadcast threats or demands. They came like a storm. First came the ships, black and silent, cutting through the void. Korin watched from the trenches as the first dropships descended, their engines glowing like falling stars. The hatches opened. And that's when Korin's world changed. The soldiers stepped out in perfect order. Their boots struck the ground in unison. No shouting. No roaring. Just calm, controlled motion. Their armor was dull gray, marked only with small flags and numbers. "They look bored," one of Korin's comrades whispered. "They look like they've done this 1,000 times, Korin muttered back. Then the battle began. Korin's side fired first. Bright energy bolts lit up the night sky. The air filled with smoke and dust. The humans didn't panic. Their lines shifted smoothly, shields raised in a perfect wall. Then they advanced, not running, not rushing, just walking, step by step, like an unstoppable machine. Korin fired again and again, but the humans kept coming. When one fell, 2 others dragged him back, and another stepped forward to fill the gap. Their formation never broke. The sound of their weapons was strange, sharp, controlled bursts instead of the wild volleys Korin's people were used to. Each shot seemed to find a target. Each movement had a purpose. This isn't war, Korin thought. This is a lesson. The ground shook as human artillery fired from far behind. Their shells didn't fall randomly. Each blast landed with perfect precision, destroying enemy guns, cutting off escape routes, driving Korin's people exactly where the humans wanted them to go. By nightfall, the field was quiet. Korin sat in the dirt, his rifle empty, staring at the humans as they moved through the battlefield. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They simply checked the fallen, treated the wounded, and secured the area with methodical efficiency. One of them approached Korin. The soldier's helmet retracted, revealing a human face, calm, unreadable, and strangely young. "You're lucky," the human said in a voice like cold steel. "Surrender." Live. Korin didn't argue. He was taken to a holding camp, fed, and treated for his burns. No one tortured him, no one mocked him. The humans just worked. Every soldier had a job, and every job was done with the same quiet focus. Days passed. Korin watched as they repaired their machines, trained in perfect rhythm, and prepared for the next campaign. He noticed something strange. They laughed sometimes, joked softly with each other, but when the order came, they moved instantly. They were not fighting because they loved war. They were fighting because it had to be done. And that terrified Korin more than any screaming barbarian ever had. When they finally released him, Korin returned to his people with a message. "They are not like us," he told the War Council. "They do not fight with rage or pride. They fight with purpose. Every soldier knows exactly what to do, and they do it without hesitation. If we keep fighting like we always have, they will crush us." Some laughed at him. Others grew angry. Korin couldn't sleep. Every night, he heard the sound of boots marching in perfect unison, the quiet, controlled voices of the humans, the relentless rhythm of their advance. His War Council dismissed his warnings. "Humans bleed like anyone else," they said. "Then why do they win every battle?" Korin shot back. But they wouldn't listen. So Koren made a choice. When the humans came again, Koren didn't fight. He walked out to meet them with his hands raised. The soldiers surrounded him, rifles steady, but they didn't shoot. "I want to join you," Koren said. The commander looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "Then you'll train." That was how Koren found himself on a human transport ship, leaving his world behind. The training. The training camp was nothing like what Koren expected. On the first day, they stripped him of his old armor, his rifle, even his name. He was given a number, a bunk, and a uniform that felt heavier than it looked. "You are not soldiers yet," the instructor barked. "You are chaos. Our job is to turn you into order." And they did. Koren learned to march, to run until his legs burned, to carry twice his own weight without stopping. He learned to fire human weapons short, controlled bursts, never wasting a shot. He learned to fight as part of a team. At first, he hated it. He was used to fighting for himself, shouting, charging, doing whatever it took to stay alive. Now, if he broke formation, everyone was punished. "No heroics," the instructor said. "No glory. The mission comes first. The team comes first. You come last." It was brutal. But slowly, Koren began to understand. One night, after a long march, one of the human recruits collapsed. The sergeant didn't yell. He didn't leave the soldier behind. Instead, he ordered two others to carry him, and they kept moving. Koren realized something then: they were more than soldiers. They were a single living machine. Every part mattered. The test. After months of training, Koren faced his first test. It wasn't a real war, but it felt like one. The instructors threw them into a simulated battlefield with blinding lights, smoke, and deafening gunfire. Koren's squad was pinned down by automated turrets. His old instincts told him to run, to break cover and charge. But he remembered the drills. He gave the hand signal he'd practiced 100 times. The squad shifted, covering each other, laying down fire in perfect rhythm. Step by step, they moved forward, just like the humans he had once feared. When they reached the objective and took the enemy position, Koren felt something strange in his chest: pride, not for himself, but for the team. When the simulation ended, the instructor simply said, "You are soldiers now." The real battle. The first real mission came days later. Koren's squad was deployed to a frontier world under attack. This time, the enemy was not his people, but a brutal raiding species that killed civilians for sport. Koren's heart pounded as the dropship descended. But when the ramp dropped, and his boots hit the ground in unison with the others, he felt something he never had before: control. The squad moved as one, clearing buildings, rescuing survivors, driving back the raiders step by step. At one point, a child ran out into the open, caught between crossfire. Without thinking, Koren broke formation, but this time, it wasn't chaos. His team instantly shifted, covering him as he grabbed the child and dragged her to safety. When the fight was over, Koren stood in the ruins, breathing hard, armor scorched. He looked at his squad mates, tired, silent, alive. This wasn't about glory. This wasn't about bloodlust. It was about doing the job right. The change. That night, Koren sat by the fire with the other soldiers. One of them handed him a ration bar. "You did good today," the human said. Koren stared into the flames. "I thought I knew war," he said quietly. "But this is something else." The human nodded. "War isn't chaos. It's work. Hard work. We do it so others don't have to." Koren thought about that for a long time. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a weapon. He felt like a protector. The galaxy was burning. Word of the humans' campaign spread faster than any ship could travel. Worlds surrendered without a fight. Others resisted and were crushed with surgical precision. And now, Corrin's homeworld was next. When the orders came down, Corrin felt like someone had driven a spike through his chest. He had spent months training, fighting, learning to trust the humans. But the thought of pointing his rifle at his own people made his hands shake. That night, he sat alone outside the barracks, staring at the stars. "They're your enemy," one of his squad mates said softly, sitting beside him. "They're my people," Corrin replied. "Doesn't matter," the human said. "When we deploy, you'll have to choose." Corrin didn't sleep that night. The march toward home. The dropship was quiet on the way down. No shouting, no chanting, just the steady sound of weapons being checked. Corrin sat in silence, helmet in his lap. The planet below glowed blue and green, beautiful, fragile, and about to become a battlefield. "Remember your training," the sergeant said. "Remember the mission." The ramp dropped. The air smelled like rain and soil. Corrin stepped onto his home world for the first time in months, but now he wore human armor, carried human weapons, and marched in human formation. He wasn't sure who he was anymore. The first clash. Resistance fighters attacked them outside the capital. Blaster fire lit up the hills. Explosions shook the ground. Corrin dove for cover with the rest of his squad. When he looked over the ridge, he froze. He recognized the fighters. They weren't soldiers. They were farmers, miners, boys he had grown up with. He could see their fear. He could hear them shouting, just like he once had. "Squad, advance," the sergeant ordered. Corrin hesitated. 1 second. 2. Then his training took over. He gave the signal. His squad shifted, covering him as they moved forward, not to slaughter, but to push the fighters back, force them to retreat without unnecessary deaths. Corrin's heart pounded as he fired in controlled bursts, targeting weapons, not bodies. And somehow, they drove the fighters off without killing them all. When the last shot faded, Corrin was shaking. The confrontation. Later, they secured the capital. Corrin was summoned to the commander's tent. "You hesitated," the commander said flatly. "Yes, sir." "You broke formation to minimize casualties." "Yes, sir." The commander studied him for a long moment. "Why?" Corrin swallowed hard. "Because they're not the enemy. They're scared. They're fighting the way I used to, without discipline, without hope. If we kill them all, they'll never change. If we show them how to fight right." The commander raised an eyebrow. "You think they can learn?" Corrin nodded. "If I could, they can." Silence filled the tent. Finally, the commander said, "Then teach them." Corrin blinked. "Sir. You're being reassigned. You'll train a local defense force. Teach them what you've learned. Show them there's a better way." The turning point. Weeks passed. Corrin drilled his people from sunrise to sunset. At first, they resisted. They mocked him, called him a traitor, spat at the ground when he passed. But when raiders attacked a border village, Corrin's recruits moved as one, shields up, weapons steady, just like he taught them. They saved every civilian. For the first time, Corrin saw pride in their eyes. "They're learning," one of his squad mates said with a grin. "They're becoming soldiers," Corrin replied quietly. And then, one night, as he watched the stars, Corrin realized something that made his chest ache. He wasn't fighting against his people anymore. He was fighting for them. The choice. When the humans prepared to leave, Corrin had a choice. He could return to his squad, keep marching across the galaxy, fighting war after war. Or he could stay here, stay with his people, keep training them, turn them into something better. He stood before the commander. "You've earned your place with us," the commander said. "But this is your home. Decide. Korin looked at his recruits, standing tall, armor shining in the moonlight. He thought about the day he first saw the humans step out of their dropships, calm and unstoppable. He smiled. "I'm staying," he said. The commander nodded. "Then make them ready." Korin saluted as the dropships lifted off, leaving him in the quiet night. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a weapon. He felt like a leader. And when the next war came, his people would be ready. The sky burned red. Korin stood on the ridge, helmet under his arm, watching the enemy fleet blot out the stars. They weren't just raiders this time, they were an alliance of warlords, pirates, and mercenary clans, all united by one goal: crush humanity before they could expand any further. And his world was in their path. Behind him stood the force he had trained. Once, they were farmers, miners, and frightened villagers. Now they stood in formation, armor polished, rifles charged, waiting for orders. Korin felt a surge of pride. They looked like soldiers. They were soldiers. Dropships roared overhead, landing in perfect formation. The ramps dropped, and the humans emerged calm, disciplined, every movement precise. The human commander approached Korin, visor reflecting the fire in the sky. "You asked for this," she said. Korin nodded. "We're ready." The commander studied the local recruits for a moment, then gave a rare smile. "Let's see what they can do. The invasion begins." When the enemy hit, they hit hard. Artillery fire turned the horizon into a wall of flame. Dropships screamed out of the clouds, disgorging wave after wave of enemy troops. But this time, Korin's people didn't scatter. "Shields up," he shouted. The first volley slammed into their lines, but the shield wall held. Then Korin gave the signal and his soldiers fired back in short, perfect bursts, just as he had taught them. The enemy expected panic. They got precision. Within minutes, the first wave was broken. But the real battle was just beginning. Side by side with humanity, Korin's force linked up with the human squads, forming a single, unified line. He could hear the human sergeants barking orders, the steady rhythm of their advance. His own people fell in beside them, matching their movements step for step. For the first time, Korin wasn't just watching humanity's army. He was part of it. They pushed forward together, clearing trenches, securing artillery positions, turning the tide. At one point, enemy mechs charged through the smoke, massive, hulking machines that would have sent Korin running months ago. But not today. He gave the order, his gunners dropped to one knee, and they focused fire on the mech's joints, just like they'd drilled. The machine collapsed in a shower of sparks, and Korin felt a rush of triumph. His people were holding. They were winning. The turning point. But victory never came cheap. An explosion tore through the right flank, scattering Korin's recruits. "Fall back," someone screamed. Korin grabbed a rifle and ran straight into the chaos. "Hold the line," he shouted, voice cutting through the panic. "Form on me." One by one, they rallied, regrouped, locked shields again. By the time the humans arrived with reinforcements, Korin's line was holding, bloodied but unbroken. The commander approached him afterward, armor scorched, visor cracked. "You just saved the flank," she said. Korin wiped the soot from his face. "No," he said. "They saved the flank. The final push." At dawn, the humans and Korin's militia launched a counterattack. Dropships screamed overhead, laying down precise fire as the infantry advanced in perfect formation. Korin was at the front, rifle in hand, moving with the humans like he had been born to do it. The enemy broke. Their commanders were cut off, their lines shattered, their remaining ships fleeing into orbit. When the smoke cleared, Korin stood on the battlefield, chest heaving, staring at the rising sun. They had done it. Not just the humans. Not just his people. Together. A new future. That night, the humans and locals sat around the same fires, sharing rations, laughing quietly despite the losses. Corin looked around at the faces human and alien alike and felt something deep in his chest. This is what war is meant to be, he thought. Not endless chaos. Not slaughter for pride. But unity. Purpose. Strength. The human commander raised her cup. To new allies, she said. Corin raised his own. To the future. And as the stars returned to the sky, Corin knew that whatever came next, his world would never be the same. They were ready now. Ready to fight not just for survival but for something greater. The galaxy stood at the edge of a knife. The enemy coalition had regrouped. This time, they weren't just raiding. They weren't just fighting for territory. They were coming to wipe humanity and every world that stood with them off the map. The humans called it the final campaign. And Corin was ready. The call to arms. Messages flashed across every comm channel. Planets pledged soldiers, ships, and resources. Corin's world was among them. When the human fleet arrived, Corin led his militia to the docks. His recruits, once ragged villagers, now marched in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under the starlight. When the human commander saw them, she nodded once. "You've done well," she said. Corin smiled grimly. "We're not done yet." The largest fleet in history. The staging point was a sight Corin would never forget. Hundreds of warships hung in orbit like a steel constellation. Human dreadnoughts, allied cruisers, carrier groups all ready for the biggest battle in galactic history. As Corin's ship approached, his militia stared wide-eyed at the sheer scale of it all. "This isn't an army," one whispered. "No," Corin said quietly. "It's a promise. The battle for the galaxy." When the enemy fleet jumped in, the void erupted with light. Ship-to-ship combat turned space into a blinding storm of plasma fire. Missiles streaked between cruisers. Fighters screamed across the black sky. Corin's dropship shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere of the enemy stronghold world. When the ramp dropped, the ground shook with artillery fire. And then, they were running. Corin's boots hit the dirt, his militia forming up on instinct. The humans were already there, advancing in flawless formation. "Stay tight," Corin barked. The battlefield became a nightmare of smoke, dust, and thunder. But this time, Corin wasn't afraid. Every move, every shot, every order was exactly what he had trained for. Side by side, humans and locals pushed forward, street by street, trench by trench, until they reached the enemy command complex. The emotional turn. Inside the compound, Corin came face to face with someone he never expected, an old friend, one of the few who had laughed at him when he warned the War Council months ago. The friend's rifle was shaking in his hands. "Why are you fighting with them?" the friend shouted over the roar of gunfire. "You're one of us." "I am one of you," Corin said, lowering his weapon. "That's why I'm here. Because if we don't fight together, we all die." The friend's eyes darted to the humans advancing down the hall, their movements precise, unstoppable. "Join us," Corin said. "Right now. Help us end this." For a heartbeat, the entire battle seemed to pause. Then the friend dropped his rifle and nodded. And just like that, the last resistance in the compound fell. Victory at a price. When the fighting finally stopped, the field was silent. Bodies, human and alien alike, lay across the scorched ground. The air was thick with smoke. Corin sat on a broken wall, helmet off, sweat running down his face. The human commander approached, her armor scorched and cracked. "It's over," she said softly. Corin looked out at the battlefield. "No," he said. "It's just beginning." Because now there was something greater than survival. There was rebuilding. There was peace to protect. And Corin knew that peace would only last as long as they were willing to fight for it. The resolution. Weeks later, a council was formed not just of humans, but of every species that had stood with them. Corin stood in the council chamber, wearing the uniform of a human officer but carrying the crest of his own people on his chest. When it was his turn to speak, he looked around the room. War taught us who we were, he said. But peace will decide who we become. We can fight together. Now we must learn to live together. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then the commander rose and saluted him. One by one, the others did the same. And for the first time since he had stepped onto a battlefield, Corin felt hope, real hope, not just for himself, but for the entire galaxy. The war was over. But the future was just beginning. But Corin could still hear the steady rhythm of human boots in his mind. He knew the truth. This was not just another war. This was a new age. And if his people did not change, they would not survive it.